वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा, वाहिगुरु जी की fateh. In the topic tonight, we will be discussing oneness in the context not only of how we've come to know about it or hear about it out in the world, but really in terms of Gurbani and what it means in light of Gurbani as interpreted from within Gurbani in a way that is very immediate, very visceral and real, and how I might be able to live with it. So that is our hope today. The agenda is that we should not assume that whatever is being presented is in any way claiming a finality. There is no ownership of the truth that is being presented. But really, what it is that Gurbani is a complex subject. The subject of Gurbani is complex. It need not be complicated, but what it requires is for us to be very diligent in the way that we approach its study in order to do something with our life. It has an effect upon our life. And in order to know that, we need to be conversant with the Gurbani language and the concepts that emerge within it and what they mean within a context. So what we will do is we'll set a context today in this session, and the following sessions, we're going to develop that further to get deeper into the oneness concept. So we will get our direction from within Gurbani, and we will also identify certain pitfalls that we fall into usually. And you'll find that when you hear them, they'll become fairly apparent. So we will steer clear of those pitfalls, and we will develop a methodology, a model from us to operate from. And as I do that with you, at the end of this session, we will share an interpretation which is derived from one and from oneness. And that is our source to view Gurbani in a way that we can live in accordance and in alignment with it. While we look at, we've been reading Gurbani, we've been going to Gurdwara, we've been going to camps and all types of experiences within the world. Why is it that we're not getting the crux, the tat of Gurbani? There are certain things that are in the way. So it is just better for us to clear that up so we can clear our table, our mental table, so to speak, so we can engage Gurbani in a way that makes an impact upon our life. So the biggest impediment in us being able to deal with Gurbani, it has to do with the fact that our theses are borrowed. Oneness is an immense and incomparable concept. Oneness is huge. And what we are doing is that we are reducing it so that it's palatable, so that it's convenient for us to take in. So what we do is, rather than enlarging our understanding, rather than challenging the notions that we may be coming with to Gurbani, we want to use Gurbani to fit those narratives. And that becomes a problem. And most of it is not validated in through our life. We are dealing with Gurbani as concepts, as abstract conception, which does not make any difference to life. So the purpose now, when we are going into oneness, is not for us to know something, to learn something new. The purpose is for it to have an impact upon our life, like right now. The other thing that gets in the way for us is that because the oneness is so huge, and the one is so huge, incomparably huge, we want to impose our own being, what we're used to, and whatever we think is high upon it. And that, in one way or another, is not, again, dealing with reality. What it is we want to shape the world in our own image. And that becomes a problem. And what these are views of the world that are very limited and limiting. And what we do is we've created the one as an other. And there's this other out there, and we are looking to deal with it. We are looking to make concessions. We are looking to do things so we will get something else. And that creates a problem. Why is that? And Kabir Sahib calls it Logan Ram Khilona Jana. Because we are dealing in a state of duality. We are dealing with an other. We think we are dealing with this massively powerful being, and in some way, I must appease it. I must do this in order to get that. And that is the hallmark of Karam Kand, which is addressed in Gurbani. And that we have to rise above it in our actions, in our thought process, in our dealing, in our being. Because what duality does is that it operates within fear and insecurity. We feel helpless. At the base of all, we are not being responsible about life. We want to give responsibility to others, to the learned ones. And what do? In order to feel safe, we join camps. We join jathe-bandiyan. We look at castes, the jat, qualifications, material comparisons for success. But a Gurbani success is something completely different. Who we are in the world is self-proclaimed Sikhs. We state many times that we are born into a Sikh family, and there is no meaning of that in Sikhi. But it's loudly expressed by people who are largely being unreflective and dualistic in their outlook. A lot of them will talk about olden times, golden times. And some think that we'll make things move forward, as though Sikhi can be relevant today, as though it was ever a question. Sikhi was never in question. It's really our interpretation of it and the way that we have been expounding upon it and living it. That is clearly rooted in the past and in outdated notions, and not notions that reflect the power and beauty of Gurbani, but rather of something other than the Gurmat that we claim that it is representing. So Sikhi is not time-bound. If it isn't time-bound, then the question isn't of it being relevant today or tomorrow. Sikhi is relevant if we have the courage to interpret it in the way that it is intended, and the intention is huge. So we will need to be very courageous and face our fears and break out of the bounds and the bondage of our experience and our borrowed theses and knowledge. So with that in mind, we're going to move forward again, looking towards identity, because that too, the I in the identity, is at the heart of our issues. So this I in Gurbani is called main. It is the sense and the assertion that I am. That sense is opposed to Gurmat. It states, Gurmat states, Sab kich tu hai mere pyare, teri kudrat ko bal jai jiyo. So in a real sense, the journey of a human is from main, from main, to tu. That, in short, is our journey. But it can be a very long journey. For many of us, it can be quite a struggle. But as we live in this dualistic paradigm, because we want to feel superior, we want to look superior, so we have given labels to ourselves, to each other. We call ourselves Khalse, many of us. We will call some Murak, some Siane. What do these mean? These are merely labels that box us in. And Gurbani breaks the bondage of all types of boxes. Gurbani is talking about na ko Murak, na ko Siana, varta sab kich tera pana. And actually, it is the pana that is at the heart of a lot. And we'll get to that. And that is powerfully expressed in this Shabad. And this states, Hum nahi change, bura nahi koe. This is not an expression of humility. That's how it's been shown and interpreted by people across the sphere. It is not about humility. This is really about facts. It's a statement of fact that there is no changa and there is no bura. Because whatever we see as a changa or a bura, good or bad, these are merely our persona. It is the role that I play in the world, and it changes. And it's nuanced. So the role I play is temporary, but our labels try and fix us into a box. Actually, if we pay attention, the same Shabad earlier tells us, "Antar vasa na bahar jaye, amrit chhod kahe bekhaye." Then comes the essence. Rao, aisa gyan japo man mere, hovo chakar sache kere. This is the gyan Gurbani wants us to be earning in our life, in our experience of life. Now, what we see is that in the world, everybody wants to be Giani, everybody wants to claim great earnings. And Gurbani says, Gyan Tyan Sab Koi Rava. Everyone is engaged in these claims. But in reality, is Bandhan Bandya Sab Jag Pave. That we are actually bound up. Living in this jug, we are bound up and we are inflexible and we're immovable. We're not finding the freedom to be able to express ourselves in creativity. And that creates a problem. Why? Because we're confused about who we are. Who we are is truly nothing. Again, this is not a statement of humility. It is the truth. And these prove the inapplicability of labels to define us qualitatively. So all of these labels are finite and they're meant to box us in, and they permit us to be comfortable in whatever cocoon that we like ourselves to be in and to define ourselves as. And we don't want to challenge our dualistic point of view. But Gurbani's game is infinite, and it requires us to be constantly present, to be constantly renewing, and to operate from first principles. And I anda seva kare so chakar hoye jal thal mahiyal rab rahya soe. So the other concept that I mentioned a little bit ago was about Khalse, because that is a part of an identity that we have taken on, the self-proclaimed six. Those who go through the ceremony of Khande ki Pahal call ourselves Khalse. But no ceremony can give us that title, because that is a distinction of Gurbani. It cannot be gotten simply by going through a mere ceremony. It's a qualitative distinction of being. But in Maya, which is an illusory game, a transitory game, a temporary game, these titles can be gotten, but not where they matter. And why is that? Because titles are meant to persist, and they remain static because, again, you're playing a small, finite game. But the game is infinite when we're talking about Gurbani, where we earn this. That is a Khed, a game of Be'ant, of the infinite, of the endless. And the standards by which we judge and are being judged is actually very high. And that creates a dissonance. You see, the dissonance is between the inner and the external. And it has been made abundantly evident in Gurbani. But we lean upon our crutches. And we just step right over substance. So Kabir Sahib calls these types of people who are living this type of life Brahmagyani. It's these Brahmagyanis. Who we were to be is the Jan. The Jan are the one who knows. They are the one who know because they're experienced. They are the ones who are committed to the task. But which task? The Rahao asked us, Man re sareo na ekya kaja. Which is the ekya kaja? It is the one, the most important thing we were to be engaged in life, which was what? Pajyo na Raghupati Raja. It was to be engaged in bhajan. Again, that has something to do right here with Kaho Kabir Jan Paye Khalse Prem Bhagat Jeh Giani. It was to play the game of love. It is to be devoted. That kind of a life is what we were to be in. And then the distinction of Khalse is gotten. And gotten how? Again, we can't carry it around. We have to continue to earn it. So why do we continue to choose form over substance? And why aren't we relating with Gurbani in a way that matters to us personally, immediately, viscerally, and consistently? Why do we play intellectual games? And we compare the way of Guru Gyan with straw men of other traditions. And these are mostly based on poor translations, not powerful expositions. Why is that? One wonders. Because we are being Brahmagyani. That means we are dealing with misconceptions and erroneous notions. We don't know what we're up to. We don't understand the game. And we're just playing a different game. So why? Again, the question is, because most of the time, we're really not sure. Are we human being or human doings? I know it sounds funny, but this is a recurring problem, especially for religious people. Religious people are perpetually concerned with what they must do. I got to do this, I got to do that. If I do this, will I get that? Constantly this lean and dein, give and take. We have made Logan Ram Khilona Jana. We have made the one into a game, and that too a very meaningless, childish game of give and take. And it doesn't work like that. We will go to schools, institutions, to Jathe Bandiyan, to saints who are supposed to know, scholars. But the problem is a lot of us who are being led by uninformed leaders. But this is all at the heart of Karam Kand. And Gurbani directs us. Guru Dware Hoye So Ji Paisi. Not Gurudware Jaye. Because Gurudware is not a place to go. It is the coming of wisdom through Gur. That's the technique through which the wisdom comes. We are to align with that. The question, the fundamental question in Japbani is give sachiara hui hai. It is not give sachiara baniye. Because baniye is to make something. It is to get something, like a title, for instance. We look at then to doctor ban gaya, engineer ban gaya. Did you become an engineer? Did you become a doctor? Right? But actually, that's not it. Because what you get from there is just a degree. Who you are there for as a doctor is to be a healer, not to be a doctor. It is to be a healer. Because there is a qualitative distinction behind the work that you are up to. And that will show up in life. But it doesn't if we are concerned with titles. If we look only to titles, then we do not get the essence. What we get is a mere shell. And Gurudware, again, not a building. These days, it's even worse because people have started calling it Guru Kar, which is really quite an offensive statement. Because there is no Kar for the infinite. It is everywhere. And we can get our wisdom everywhere, anywhere. There is no place that we cannot have it. So it cannot be a place. This is not bound. Guru is not bound anywhere. Neither is wisdom. So we have imagined it otherwise, but Gurudwara is a wisdom coming through the Guru. This is universal wisdom. So similarly, and finally, we talk about Jog, which is a very important concept, grossly misunderstood in the world, because we are turning it into yoga. Yoga comes from yoke. It is to join with the source. It is to be one. That's their objective. And that is why they were engaged in such unimaginably hard exercises, so to speak, But really, it wasn't the exercises. It was them disciplining themselves for something greater. Now, whatever its pitfalls are, that's not the issue that we're discussing today. But what we ought to pay attention to is what we are doing with a concept that was so lofty. We have turned it into something small and meaningless, even if it might give us some advantage. For instance, we use mindful practices. Our employers even pay for it. And why? Because it's helpful. It's a helpful step in us being able to live a life that deals with stresses and anxieties. So in that way, it definitely provides us with value. So let's not get the idea that it's not is without value, because it has some value, but it is not jog. Gurbani's jog is absolutely different, and it cannot be had through talk. We can know the right words to say. We can know the right things to use, words to contort what our true intentions are. We do it in the world all the time, don't we? We manipulate. But through our words or our rhetoric, we are not going to get the distinction in Gurbani, which is of jog. And that's what it means. Jog is only possible when ek drisht kar samsar jana, jogi kahiya soi. And that's the rahau. That when my vision of my view of the world, my paradigm is of oneness. And what does that mean? We'll get to that. Only then do I get to be a yogi. When I'm able to see that underlying unity. Certain basics we should also go into now. This is the mool that all of us are aware of. I realize that it looks different to what you're used to. And that's okay. We are not going to use this as our model to build upon. What this does is it's a very helpful way to build upon what we're going to see. And I'd like to share that with you and its implications and give a brief explanation of its structure. So the foundation of Gurbani is one. This is a statement of fact, which many call Mool Mantar. We'll just call it Mool for now, which states that all that was, all that is, and all that ever will be is one. That is a suchness that is unfolding via being. And what it is creative. It is free from imposition and insecurity. It is fully present and spontaneous, not contrived. It is self-manifest, as well as willfully fractured. And it becomes whole through practicing the way. A summary of this mood is that the one has manifested itself into multiplicity. It did it to be enriched by the experience of all possibility, while all of its parts of the one, they imagine themselves as separate. Yet each have the potential to operate from their essence of wholeness. Why? Because the truth is that there is nothing else. There is only the one. So fear, insecurity, are jumping around the past and the future are important only to those who are operating from a dualistic perspective, from duality. And these result in a lack of creativity. We fall into habitual patterns, cyclical patterns of being. And that is why we're looking constantly outside of ourselves. This is the being referred to in the Mool as Giani. Hence, freedom from these cycles of habits would leave us free to be spontaneous. That's what a Giani is. And creative in our persona, which is Karta Purakh. But that is only possible if I am being fully present now, which is Akal Murat. You see, one thing common to all humans is that we are rarely ever present. Depending upon the state of life that we are experiencing, we are either reminiscing about the past, old as gold, or suffering the anxiety and trauma of the past, or we are lost in fantasies of what is to come, or anxious and fearful about what is to come. Will it come? Oh, what happens if it doesn't happen? Where will I be? What will happen? It's these things that keep us in a loop. I think you can relate. Now, these are all pathologies of being in a small boat riding stormy seas. We're being tossed around. So being present is difficult because it is fleeting and it can be pinned down. It's gone before we can even conceive of it. Now. Humans operating at the highest level of their chosen fields know what it is like to be present. For them, their failures and their successes of the recent past, they mean nothing because they're in the middle of the game. They got to have their eye on the ball. They've got to be fully present and playing now. That is akin to what we are talking about, except it's not that type of a game or our job, for instance. It's our life. That is what is at stake. So keep in mind that this mood, the essence, is repeated before every rag, every chapter, and every topic that is discussed within Gurbani. Anytime it changes, the mool in one of its forms will show up. And what it does is it reminds us that this is the context for oneness. Isn't it shocking then how far removed our traditional interpretations are from this universal wisdom? So the path of oneness, of integrity, the way of being expressed by Gurbani, it resolves this inner lack of peace that we keep suffering. But when that is missing, what is present is sukh, which is only available by being complete and whole, by being in oneness. But by not being whole, everything we experience comes from dukh, and it's called dukh in Gurbani. All types of dukh all types of sorrow and pain and suffering, they come from not being whole, from being in duality. So if we wish to taste the amrit, so to speak, and experience the sukh, then we have to be Gurbani, not just try to understand it. So for that, we're sort of getting to the heart of this topic. Now, what is shown at the screen, I know it's hard to see fully. So what I'm going to ask is, if you can, at your own time, please go to the website at the given address and look at it closely, because these are certain concepts that occur in Gurbani, in English, written for you. Obviously, the concepts are from Gurbani, so they're not translations primarily, besides the fact that the Oang is the unmanifest, the Oankar is the manifest form, Bhram is transcendent, and Puran Bhram is the immanent, also called Ram, and we'll be discussing that. And that's about it. Everything else in here is directly from Gurbani. It's not translated, it's not interpreted for you, besides these basic large buckets. But what we're talking about here is well-meaning scholars and seekers have attempted to articulate their understanding of what is, of reality. Now, each of us does the best that we can with what tools we have. Many times, however, the immensity of all that is very difficult to convey, especially using words or concepts. So what we do is we lean upon borrowed notions rather than depth of experience. And at some point, what is logical and readily apparent, we don't even deal with that. So in this part and those that follow, we will be discussing just this small portion, which is really what deals with us and certain strands how they tie into the larger picture. It's about our place in the universe or multiverse. Now, if your interest is piqued, then I invite you to go to the above address and just check this out so you're familiar with the concepts that are being talked about. And of course, you will need that for your research, and your feedback is welcome. Suffice it to say that O and Owang is the same as Anad and Nirgun right here. And it becomes Oankar when it takes form. When it is Oang plus Akar, it takes shape. Then Nirgun becomes manifest, and it becomes Sargun. And that is also called Shabd, and that is also called Ad. But again, these are not concepts that we need to be holding on to directly right now. Oang is the Nirgun Sarup, the formless Sarup. And how do we know that? Well, everything traces back to it. Since it manifested itself until now, and until it is all no more, is just the manifestation of the formless, which extends itself into subtle forms just as much to the not so subtle forms. And over here, it talks about Ovang Sad Satguru Namaskaran Ad in the beginning. After that, Mad. And until the end, it is only Nirankaran, the formless, the shapeless. The fifth Nanak says that it is all the expression of the one, because there is never, and there never has been, an other. Ape sun, ape sokasan, ape sunt ap hi jasan, apan ap ape upayo, it created itself, ape bap ap hi mayo, ape sukham, the subtle, ape sthula, what is not so subtle, lakhi na jai nanak lila. So what we need to get from this, the enlightening word of Gurbani, is that our salutations, our relationship, our fealty is only ever to the one, because that is our source, and that's the Nirankar. And Ovang, also referred to in Gurbani. Neither will anything ever, there never has been anything, and there never will be anything else. Now, when we look to Gurbani, though, the big question that we should be asking ourselves is, what is it about? What is it attempting for us to get to? What will I get out of this? Whenever I discuss or read Gurbani, I have to be very clear. What is this, the space of operation? What is the base of our inquiry? A lot of times it's evident that people are cherry picking. They do it to suit their own interpretation, and they try to fit their interests upon Gurbani. It can work a few times, but it cannot work consistently. And when it does not, the request is, please let those weak ideas fall by the wayside. Don't carry them around. They're dead weight. They're not going to help us in life. Use what is powerful. Use what I can earn and experience in life, and that will help me move forward. A lot of times people make a lot of grand statements about Gurbani in science, for instance. Charitably, we can say that these are inappropriate. And why do I call them inappropriate? I'm not someone who's against science. In fact, my own start was through science. I am a lover of the scientific methodology. A lot of what I have gotten in life, the earnings, have been through the honesty, the integrity with which the scientific approach works. And that is raised to a different level when we talk about Sikhi. It's all about authenticity and integrity. So I'm not a Luddite. Science is a fearless inquiry, and that is what I'm committed to. And by the way, Sikhi is fearless. It is born of the awe of the unknown. So the mode of operation of science is a bold seeking of embracing risk and not fearing being wrong. In fact, proves itself and improves itself by disproving itself, which is a fantastic way to test something. It's to test your own ideas. And that is the hallmark of science. So whatever dead weight we have, we should leave it behind and use powerful interpretations to move us forward, and not pre-Gurbani beliefs that have shaped much of our interpretations up until now. And what they are is merely rehashing of dualistic propaganda. And at worst, it is ignorance of shared human progress, which is masquerading as wisdom. So statements about other faith traditions, for instance, are made by people who don't really know much about these faith traditions. And they don't really know what they're talking about, but they're doing is they're destroying straw men. These are straw man arguments. Or they're trying to impose current scientific understandings upon the meanings of Gurbani and compare other traditions' old, outdated interpretations to show that somehow Sikhi is greater. But that doesn't make it greater. What we ought to do is to compare the best that someone has to offer, the highest that someone has to offer, with the best that we have. And you know what we'll find, at least that is what we found in our experience, is that there is a unity amongst various traditions when it comes to the highest level. It's easy to use straw men and make yourself look better, but it's not honest. And none of us have the market cornered on the truth. So when looking backwards from a current scientific understanding, that can be fairly disingenuous. And it's also convenient because Gurbani is in poetic verse, so it can be interpreted in many different ways. So it's very, very easy. But the problem is that as science progresses, we'll be changing our story over and over again because we're constantly trying to catch up and justify ourselves. That's not being truthful. And so what we need to do is to understand what Gurbani is about. And a lot of people focus on history, which is in one way or another focus on personalities. And they'll say that they're doing it to contextualize Gurbani. And they do it with a straight face. But what they're really doing is they're asserting Gurbani is timeless, and then they're bounding us up within stories that fit a particular time frame. And the problem happens that if you look at the Gurbani's methodology, Gurbani actually is breaking all of these bounds. Tonight's focus is on one and on oneness, which is an integrated paradigm. So it must be mentioned that Gurbani is all about me and each of the me's that are watching and listening to this. It is all about us. This Bani is not for animals. This Bani, by the way, is not cosmology. It is not physics. If we need that kind of wisdom, we can go to those types of studies. This wisdom for the rest of the world is already being given by Shabad Guru. For instance, like our internal biological processes. All of those are functioning. I don't have to think about breathing. I don't have to think about the blood that has to flow to my heart and to different extremities of my body in order for me to function. If I had to do any number of those things myself, nothing would work because we're not very good with multitasking. So what Gurbani is for me, and it is about my man. It is about how do I operate under hukam. And that is the sphere of Gurbani. So we should not be confused about our place in the world, about this fractured self that I have, which feels that it's separate from the one. You see, all language can be problematic because it's just an abstraction. It's just an approximation. And Gurbani itself says that. So it is our man that needs to accept the wisdom of Gurbani and to transform itself by aligning with universal wisdom, the Sat Gur. So how do we interpret Gurbani in such a way that it helps create a space for me to transform myself? Let's take an example. You can go to the website at oneinfinite.com for this interpretation that uses oneness at its base. Now, many of you are familiar with Siddh Gosht. If not, then you ought to be. Those who are familiar have always heard This being described as Guru Nanak Sahib, showing the yogis the error of their ways. And they'll ask him questions, and he just answers them and lets them know what's what. What is the result? We walk away thinking that Guru Nanak Sahib was the man, putting all these foolish yogis in their place. Maybe the lesson we learn from that is to tell others how wrong they are, and that all the truth is under our purview. Maybe that is why we've been used to witnessing so much conflict. But what if we have been interpreting it in a way that doesn't serve to transform us? I say that because I'm not a yogi. I don't know any yogis. I suspect you aren't a yogi, and you don't know very many yogis either. So what am I? And what are you supposed to do with this Bani? If I think this is Guru Nanak engaging the yogis, then this is pretty meaningless to me. I can't very well use it for my own transformation. By the way, this is the same case when Guru Nanak Sahib is talking to Pandit, to the Mullah, any type of a leader, any type of an occupation, which is different from us. Like, what does that mean to us? Especially if it's tied up in history. We are missing the boat. But if Gurbani is all about me, then all of it is relevant to me. I just need to understand that all of these various ways of being that we associate with the jogi, with the mullah, with the pandit, etc., are all ways of being that are present within me. Then there is immediate guidance for me. Also, that is the only way this Bani can really be universal and timeless. Else we put it in a box and it'll remain there, stuck in South Asia for the most part. So you may find that by making it immediately relatable to the seeker, to the Jigyasu. This Bani is not a Guru Nanak's lecture to the yogis. Rather, it can be an opening, a self-reflective opening, and appreciative inquiry, which is willing to draw from the wisdom that is already there. Yeah, we make distinctions when needed, but what this is a humble seeking of value. It's a genuine engagement. It need not be a sort of a superior lording over others. That is how it's been seen. So what it's saying is that I am willing to cut out and separate my own biases that I'm bringing to the table. Whenever I'm engaging anyone, it's not really me engaging them. Most of the time, I'm bringing a huge set of ideas, and I'm trying to defend those ideas, not even really listening to them. So the first thing I need to do is to identify what they are and to cut them out, and to be open. Open to what? To the wisdom that already exists. Because there may be a lot for me to be gaining from this engagement. So it's fairly inauthentic if I'm simply justifying myself that I'm already right. And my job is simply to convince others. Well, that is not being authentic. But if I come to an engagement, to every engagement, open to infinite possibility, then the question is, what could we create out of nothing? Anything. That's the power. The possibilities are endless when you come from nothing and you are open. When we are ready to acknowledge that there could be unknown wisdom available at any time by anywhere, talking to anybody. And especially when you go to accomplished people. And that's very different from the know-it-all Nanak that has been presented to us traditionally. I hope that you can see that there is a world of a difference. Am I committed to transforming myself? That's the question that we need to ask ourselves. Then I do not approach Gurbani or work or school to justify myself or feel good about who I am being right now. I'm not satisfied merely by continuing that, by the recurring pathologies, my diseased view of life, If I'm ready to face that Gurbani is talking about me, my man, then I am not a sheep. Rather, I approach Gurbani boldly as a seeker, hungry and ready to walk the path of bhakti, of loving devotion, to the discovery of self. In the next chapter of this inquiry, we'll talk about some fundamental distinctions. Who are we? Many say we are Atma. People talk about soul, for instance. We'll discuss that in the next section, and we'll look at Gurbani's take on it and a structure that forms from that, and what meaningful inferences can be made about reality of oneness. That'll be in the next section, and we hope that you will join. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.